Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. About 10 years ago, I was wandering the stacks of my local library, one of my favorite restful things to do. And on one of the end caps was a book on the history of the Appalachian Trail. Now mind you, this is before the release of the movies A Walk in the Wood and Wild. And I'd heard of the Appalachian Trail, but I didn't really know a whole lot about it. So I checked out the book and brought it home to read, and I discovered that the Appalachian Trail runs right through my home state of North Carolina. And not only that some of the people actually hiked the entire 2,000 plus miles all at one time. I couldn't believe it. I was fascinated by this, and I decided that while I didn't want to spend several months of my life walking the trail at one time, that I would like to do what they call section hiking the Appalachian Trail. And so over the last 10 years or so, I've been doing little chunks as I have time. But I figured if I want to learn how to backpack, first I'm going to have to learn how to hike. This is before I did any of these outdoors adventures at all. In fact, this is what actually got me into this whole path of adventure travel. So happily, with the help of the internet, I Googled hiking clubs, and that's when I discovered Meetup, another key find that also opened tremendous doors for me because I was relatively new to the Triangle area and really hadn't met anybody. So that not only helped me meet hiking friends, I met friends that have become lifelong friends just due to that one clicking try to find a hiking club. So that was a really key thing that actually really changed my life. So on the meetups, I found a group called THOG, which stands for Triangle Hiking and Outdoor Club. So I signed up for THOG, and at my first event, which was a multi-mile hike in Umstead State Park in Raleigh, I told the leader, Casey, what I wanted to do, that I wanted to do a little section hike of the Appalachian Trail. And gratefully, he didn't laugh at me, and he was very encouraging, and in many ways took me under his wing. Yet another THOG leader, Sherry, was running a backpack conditioning series of hikes, so I signed up for that as well. We were instructed to bring our backpack, and at this time, I still had no idea what a backpack even was. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing, like totally 100% clueless. And the only thing I could rustle up was I borrowed a book bag from somebody, and I showed up with some books in this bag. I am sure that Sherry was inwardly rolling her eyes, but she was very sweet. But you had to be wondering, what on earth is this little princess doing here? And happily enough, I have to report later, Sherry and I are also very good friends. Because gratefully, once Sherry found out that I was serious, that I just was ignorant, she was very, very helpful and very encouraging of helping me figuring out this whole hiking and backpacking thing. And one really important thing that I'm really grateful for is the sound gear, backpacking gear advice I got from the folks in this group. They saved me hundreds of dollars in potential bad purchases. And this is something I'm really trying to help you with myself on this podcast as my way of paying it forward to all the helpful things that my THOG friends did for me. Because of THOG, I was able to pull all the more experienced hikers and all the pros and cons of all the different gear, and people are big gearheads, so everybody's got their opinions. And so this way I was able to make some wise decisions because the gear can get really expensive. So after my initial meeting with Casey, hanging out with Sherry and doing the conditioning things, we fast forward about 3 months, and I set out my very first backpacking weekend with THOG, and we went to Grayson, highlands on the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. It was absolutely gorgeous. And Sherry planned it pretty well because this was a pretty easy backpacking trip. Not an overly ambitious hike. I think we only did like 6 miles in the day before we set up camp. It was a challenging but also encouraging in that we're like, oh yeah, we got this, we got it, we can do this. So that was a really smart thing that she did when she set that up. The next, I don't know, maybe it was a weekend or two after that, I went out with Casey and 4 others, really experienced backpackers, and he let me just kind of tag along with them. And we went to Linville Gorge. Now that was a hard backpacking hike. And that last day, I swear, I don't remember the name of the trail, but it was straight up, totally exposed, no trees, and it was hot. So I earned my stripes on that trip. And then I think it was the following month after that I did my very first long-distance backpacking trip with my girlfriends Jane and Jerry, and we went out for 2 weeks on the Appalachian Trail. And that was quite the backpacking adventure. I was so proud of myself. That was a really tough thing to do. It was a really tough hike. I think we did maybe 170 miles. The distance escapes me now. And my body, because I was doing the things I'm going to teach you today, I was super trained. I was super prepared. My gear was exactly right. And I planned my food pretty well. After that trip, I was like, I could really call myself a backpacker. So what I'm going to hope to help you with today is to teach you via this podcast what my T-Hog hiking buddies taught me. We're going to look at choosing your destination, conditioning your body, planning, getting, and testing your gear, how to plan your food. We're going to deal with the logistics and the things that are encompassing along that, as far as making sure you know how to use your map and your compass and leave no trace, all that kind of good stuff. So to begin with, you got to choose your destination and what's your adventure going to be about? What are you going to do? So for your first backpacking adventure, I'm going to suggest that you choose a place like Sherry did for us, where we backpacked into Grayson highlands, only that 6 miles. So we're not trying to do the Bataan Death March. All right? You're going to test your gear in that true adventure situation, different than like when you're practicing at home. So at Grayson Highlands, we had the ranger station was nearby. There's lots of people. So it was a good way for us to get our feet wet in this whole backpacking experience. And we're just doing it in baby steps. So for your first actual backpacking adventure, pick a relatively easy weekend trip. But you don't want to do the actual backpack until after you condition yourself. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. So if your easy destination goes well, then you step it up. Remember, we're always trying to plus one. So you do an easy one, so now you do a little harder one, or maybe a little longer one, or multiple days, because the body changes over a couple of days. So adding more days might be the way to plus one. And then each time you go out, keep building on your experience, build the duration, build the difficulty until you feel fully comfortable that you've got your groove on. So let's get our groove on. How are we going to condition our bodies? Most people can teach their body to safely carry about 20% more weight than they are on their backs. My base weight of my pack and my gear, and that's not including food and water, is about 18 pounds. My hiking buddy John, however, likes to go super lightweight, and his base weight is down to about 10 pounds. But you're going to find it's a trade-off between comfort at night and comfort during the day carrying all that weight. So if you want to be really comfortable at night, you're going to be carrying a lot of weight during the day for that comfort. There's also a monetary trade-off, as it costs usually about at least $100, I think even more these days, for every pound you want to try to reduce your pack weight. So if you want to get more high-tech gear, every pound that you shave off is going to cost you about $100. When I get my pack fully loaded up with food and water, it can weigh as much as 30 pounds. So let's do a little bit of the math. I weigh a little under 150 pounds, so let's use 150. So 20% of 150 pounds is 30 pounds. Now, since I live in such a flat area, I generally try to train to about 35, 36 pounds in hopes of trying to make up the difference of the fact that I don't have the elevation practice as much as you might where you live. And I'll also add in some practice on steps at my local hospital just so I can stretch out those muscles and get them used to going up and down, up and down. But in any regards, you should try to never carry more than 25% of your body weight. There's going to be times that you might have to start the trip off more if there's no resupply stops on a lengthy trip. And at least on those, it's the food weight, and gradually that will go down. So how are you going to get your body used to carrying all this weight? If possible, you want to try to begin your training at least 12 weeks in advance. My friend Casey stays in condition constantly by carrying his backpack every single time he walks or hikes, so he never needs to retrain. I keep saying I want to do that, but in my current training, I'm training for a trip that I'm going to be taking next month. I've been training on the pavement around where I live now, and it's just brutal on my knees and my hips, so I've abandoned that and now have to do a longer hike at the beach on the weekends, so that way I can take my time. I'll do like 3 hours with my pack, and I'm not just killing my joints. So when you're beginning to condition your body, you just simply start out with a low weight, and then you're gradually each week working your way up to your target backpack weight. And you're going to add no more than 10% new weight each week. So we're going to use me as an example. If I put on my pack and I put some weight in there, I can barely feel about 15 pounds because my back is somewhat conditioned at all the time anyway. You might find that you need to start out lighter if you've never carried any weight on your back before. So you put on a pack and then just take some water bottles and keep adding a water bottle until you say, okay, I feel like I've got weight on there, but you don't want it to feel heavy. You just want to feel like you've got some weight on there. That's your starting weight. And so again, to add my weight, I save some Gatorade bottles, which are nice and sturdy, or you can use milk jugs or regular water bottles, and just add a little bit each time until you're adding your 10% each week. So you start with your starting weight, whatever you figured out where it just feels like you've got weight, but it's not too heavy. You feel like, piece of cake. I notice it, but it's not a big deal. So for me, that's around 15 pounds. So if I want to add 10% each week, that means I'm going to be adding in the beginning about 1.5 pounds, getting up to 2 pounds, and eventually up to 3 pounds as that 10% kind of accumulates, kind of like compound interest. So for me to train, I need at least 10 weeks to do this at the right pace of the 10% addition each week. So the first week, I'm 15 pounds. If I add 10%, that's 1.5 pounds. So week 2, I'm 16.5 pounds, and I'm 18 pounds, 20 pounds, 22, 24, 27, 29, 32, finally ending at week number 10 at 35 pounds. I've also found that putting a bath towel in my pack helps kind of keep the water bottles from banging into me and hitting me a little bit in the back. So play around with that. Or you may find just putting heavier things in there, bags of little sandbags or whatever might be helpful as well. Whatever works for you. I also encourage you to listen to episode 46 of the Active Travel Adventures podcast, where I interviewed Marcus Shapiro from Fit for Trips. He's a personal trainer and one of my affiliates, and he offers a custom online training company. So this episode will go into more details on how to prepare your body for all kinds of adventures, and he'll teach you about the balance and flexibility and strength and conditioning your muscles, etc. And he's able to even custom design a program for you. And if you decide to use him, make sure you use the coupon code ATAKIT10, ATAKIT10, and you'll get a 10% discount. And you'll also be helping to support the show, as you do anytime you use any of my links on either this podcast website or Active Travel Adventures website. So I appreciate that. So anyhow, over the next couple of months, you're going to be conditioning your body to get ready to backpack. So during this time, what else do you need to be doing? Really important. Number 3, you got to plan your gear. The first thing I want to tell you is you do not need all the junk that the outfitters say. You have to have this. That's garbage. When it comes to carrying gear on your back, less is definitely more. And it's a lot cheaper too. I get it that you want to make sure you have everything you need. I get that. But you got to remember that trade-off of being comfortable during the day or comfortable at night. So what this means to you? Okay, do you want to have this elegant sleeping, really fat, lush sleeping pad, really big sleeping bag, a pillow? The more comfort you want at night, do you want a camp chair? All those things weigh, and you're going to be feeling that weight all the way during the day. So you've got to make that trade-off. And frankly, for me, at the end of the day, I'm so tired, I could probably sleep on a rock. So as much as possible, I choose comfort during the day. I have put together what I think is, for me, the perfect packing list. You'll find that on episode number 4 of this podcast. I find it's not too much and not too little. I use every single thing in that pack virtually every day, except for hopefully not the emergency kit. But remember, my packing list, I'm in warm season, temperate climate. I don't expect to be dealing with any freezes. I can get down to like 40 degrees Fahrenheit and be fine, but I'm not set up for freezing temperatures and all that. So if you do more rugged things, you're going to need more gear than my list. But just for basic backpacking in the summer, temperate weather, my list is a pretty darn good list. I'm going to put the list on this page as well. So you'll have that checklist on both web pages. And remember too, you don't have to buy gear all the time. Sometimes you can rent gear, and often you can borrow gear from your friends. Remember, usually at least once a year, all gear goes on sale. If you've got the time to wait for the sales at the REI 20% off coupons or wherever it is that you're shopping. That way you can get the best possible quality lightweight gear at the least possible price. And to me, your most important gear purchases are your hiking boots or shoes. Check out episode 16 for some advice on that. Your tent or your tarp, whatever your sleeping cover, your backpacking home. See episode 11 for that. And then I haven't put it out yet, but I'm going to do an episode on choosing the proper sleeping bag and pad. Hopefully I'll have that out. It's going to be a while, but be on the lookout for that when that does come out. Those 3 items are your 3 most important purchases in my mind, and they also tend to be the most expensive. But they're going to make the most difference in the comfort that you have on your trip. So if you don't want to make a buying boo-boo, you want to take your time when you're picking your footwear, your tent or your tarp, and your sleeping bag and pad. I got a couple other episodes that might be helpful for you that'll help you figure out what goes in your pack, and that is the all-important emergency kit, episode number 2, and how to treat your water, episode number 3. You need both, but the brands and of what you choose aren't as critical as those other 3 items we just discussed. Hey, you want to pick up some cheap used gear? Make a road trip down to Neal's Gap in Georgia. That's the first real trail town heading northbound on the Appalachian Trail. So many of the backpackers that are doing the AT, through hiking the AT, after trekking just that first challenging 30 or so miles, they realize that maybe they didn't need that camp chair. Maybe these boots are a little heavy and I can get away with hiking shoes. Maybe I can get rid of the pillow. I mean, they're shipping back stuff, they're depositing stuff. They realize, I didn't really need it after all. Now, didn't make an exception. At my age, I take this little small baby down pillow as my luxury item. But literally, there's nothing else in my pack that I don't need, like I said, with the hopeful exception of my emergency kit. Once you've assembled all your gear, it's really important that you test it out and know how to use it. You do not want to be beat tired at the end of the day. It's dark, and now you're trying to set up your tent for the first time, and you can't figure out how to do it. You're going to be exhausted, frustrated, and in tears. So you want to practice this at home, and ideally even sleep in it. That way you can learn some patterns. Before my very first backpacking trip, every Tuesday night, I think it was for like 6 weeks, rain or shine, hot or cold, I set up my tarp in my backyard and slept in it. This way, I knew where I stored my headlamp. I knew where I kept the toilet paper. I knew where all my little habits, my chapstick, really important to me. I'm a chapstick addict. But I knew in the dark I could reach out and knew exactly where the things were because I developed habits. And that made all my future decision making about what goes where when I set up camp so simple. You also want to make sure you know how to use your stove. Cook some meals on it. And if you think you're just going to eat oatmeal for breakfast every morning, I'm going to suggest that you try this at home first for a week and see how quickly you get sick of that same food, particularly if you don't have the luxury of adding tasty but heavy fresh fruits to your oatmeal. I personally don't even use a stove. I use a little playing card size, well, I guess I call it a stove. It's the Esbit pocket stove. It looks like a metal deck of cards that opens up in the middle, and then there's a little fuel cube that I light that on fire, and that takes about 15 minutes for it to burn out, but that's enough time for me to boil some water, to heat up my dinner, make some tea or hot chocolate. So that works great for me. There's nothing to break. All I have to do is light the little cube. So I like that. I don't think I'm the only one I know that uses that. Most everybody I know uses a gas stove. So check those out and see what works for you, but make sure you know whatever you're using, you know how to use it. And if it's something that can break, you know how to fix it. I also want to refer you to Lucy in episode number 8, where she shared some tips on nutrition and outdoor adventures. I recommend taking a re-listen to that. You know, you're going to need some nutritious food to shore up your body for all the demands that you're making of it. But you also want to add some fluff foods, like candy corn in Lucy's case. Those are going to give you that little burst of energy. Let's say you have a steep climb and you've got to get up there. Having some simple carbs are going to just fuel your energy levels just to help you get up to the top of the hill. And let's face it, if you're going to be out for a long time backpacking, you're going to need a lot of calories. And junk food packs the most calories for the least amount of weight. And it's all about the weight, baby, when it comes to backpacking. The first few days you're out, your appetite's not going to change that much over normal. I made that mistake on that first section hike of the AT. I brought way too much food for that first section because I hadn't developed my appetite yet. It takes usually for me about 3 days before I start getting that ravenous where I'm really churning through the calories and really burning the calories. And my metabolism just goes into high gear. I find even when I'm backpacking that I'm not really that hungry during the day. It's dinner time I get ravenous, but during the day I have to almost force myself to snack just a little bit during the day just to keep my energy levels up. The general rule of thumb is about 2 pounds of food per day. I said the first couple days for me, I can usually get away with around 1.5 pounds, and then after 3 or 4 days, I need that 2 pounds. So your goal is going to be to take what you actually need, hopefully with variety, and then maybe bring an emergency day's worth of food, just to be on the safe side. Here's a typical menu for me for a day. Breakfast. I like instant mashed potatoes, and I chop up some pieces of beef jerky and a cup of tea. Lunch. I'll spread a whole wheat tortilla with peanut butter, sprinkle it with raisins, and roll that up. That can last for days without going bad on you. For snacks, trail mix, but At least for me, I got to bring different flavors because that first 2-week trip, I had the same kind. I got so sick of trail mix, I'll bet you it was 5 years before I could eat it again. For breaks, I like some powdered hot chocolate or tea, maybe a Snickers bar or some peanut butter crackers. And dinner, I like to eat a good quality freeze-dried meal. So I will splurge a little bit on that. And again, I want to emphasize, you want to give yourself as much variety as possible. Even though you think, oh, it's easy, I'll just pack the same thing. You're going to get so sick of it. Give yourself variety. Do yourself a favor there. And bring spices. They don't weigh a whole lot, and they can make the same thing taste differently. And there's one great thing about backpacking. Your dinner, no matter how crummy looking it is going to be the best tasting meal that you can remember. I don't know what it is about backpacking, but dinner tastes fabulous. So we've got our gear, our food, our plan, everything's good. Now we got to deal with the logistics. And what do I mean by that? All right, you're training, you're preparing and all that, but you got to lay out and plan all of the things that go into the hike. There's a few questions you need to ask yourself. Number 1, are you doing an out and back loop, or do you need to figure out how to get back to your car? How are you going to do it? Is there a shuttle service available? Can you take a bus? Or do you have to backtrack? Number 2, have you checked the weather to make sure A, you should still go, and B, you have the proper gear for this adventure if the weather is as forecasted, and allow for the worst on the downside? 3, have you notified your loved ones of your plans? And I mean detailed plans like the trail names. Do they know when to expect you back? And if they don't hear from you by a certain time, when do they need to sound the alarm? And to whom? 4, have you learned how to read your map and properly use a compass in case you get lost? I want you to listen to episode number 6 of what to do if you do get lost in the woods. My friend Jerry, the one I mentioned earlier in the story, she happened to get lost on the Appalachian Trail, and unfortunately she didn't know what to do, and it cost her her life. I don't want that happening to you. The time to learn all these skills is before you actually head out into the wild. Number 5, do you know outdoor etiquette? What are you supposed to do with your used toilet paper? What are the campfire rules? How do you store your food? Be sure to listen to episode number 10 for a refresher on leave no trace and other important manners that we all need to be practicing when we're out enjoying the wild. It's getting really crowded, and so we all need to do our part. And finally, number 6, have you checked with the rangers or whoever's in charge of wherever it is that you're going to see if you need any permits? What are the current fire restrictions? Are there any wildlife issues or other issues you need to be aware of? If bears are a concern, you want to check out episode number 5 on how to hike safely in bear country. And before you head out, make sure you check in with the rangers or whomever to let the local people know what your plans are. So now you've got your body ready, and I'm sure you're excited about your trip, but you need to make sure you're also mentally ready. Remember that at some parts of many of the days, you're going to be experiencing what we refer to as type 2 fun. If you're not familiar with this phrase, type 2 fun is when it's quite miserable at the time, but when you're nice and safe and warm, tucked back at home, reminiscing about it becomes one of your favorite memories and one of your favorite stories to tell. It could be something like climbing a brutal ascent or some kind of a mishap. You know the saying, the adventure really begins when something goes wrong. Are you mentally prepared to deal with the things that might go wrong? Do you know basic first aid? And I know you learned how to use your compass, right? So when you set out on a backpacking adventure, it's often a fun mix of type 1 fun, meaning that you're loving it that whole time, but there's also going to be a sprinkling of type 2 fun, which for many of us is that last slog at the end of the day until you find that good campsite. Terry, you're listening, right? Remember those last 3 miles of coming down Chiripo in Costa Rica? That was type 2 fun, right? But we were so proud of ourselves when we finally made it down that mountain. If you follow these guidelines and have chosen an appropriate destination for your skill level, you get your body and your mind ready, your gear's ready, it's all tested, your food is planned out, you've organized all the logistics, you are finally ready to go out in the woods and backpack. And I'm so excited for you. I do believe that unplugging and spending several days in the wild is one of my favorite mental therapies, and it does wonders for my figure too. Once you learn to backpack, you're going to have access to some views that you can only see if you backpack, and they can be extraordinary. You'll go to places that few people get to see in this world because it'll have taken you days to get there with no motor support. If you ever considered backpacking but weren't sure that you could do it, I promise you, if you follow these steps little by little, you're going to be able to do it, and you're going to feel so rewarded for your efforts. Please share this episode with your friends that you think might want to expand their hiking repertoire by adding backpacking to the mix. And as always, let me know what you think. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. Next up on the companion Active Travel Adventures podcast, our destination podcast, we're going to Bolivia. And this is a really cool episode. We were having so much fun. We went long, so I actually turned it into 2 episodes. Can't wait to share that one with you. And then the following week, we'll be back on this show, the Adventure Travel Show podcast, and we're going to talk about the different ways to start a fire, another key skill that you need to know whenever you're in the outdoors. So until then, thanks again for listening. This is Kit Parks. Adventure on.